So here we are with the cup. Now, this cup is going to use pretty much the same methods that we used on a cylinder. In this case, of course, we have one cylinder here on the inside, the shape of a cylinder here. And of course, we have one on the outside. Well, we can't really use the cylinder on this itself. If I was going to just use it across like that, I can try. Let's see what we get. UV projection. Instead of atlas, I choose cylindrical. And obviously wrong axis, and I get something like that. Well, if I try out my map, well, I get something like this. It's okay. It's not exactly great. But, well, I get square here. I get square here. Of course, at the top, I get stretching. And that stretching is not cool. The other downside, of course, is that this is a direct copy of what I see here. Not good, because what happens is if I paint a logo on the outside of this object now, I will get the logo on the inside of the cup as well, because what's happening is Modo unwrapped this object once cylindrically, but the rays went right through the object. It really thinks that it's a single surface. So the only real way to effectively solve this problem is to cut this object into a few pieces. So what I'm going to do with this object is I'm first of all going to just cut it out. Remember, you can use edit, cut, copy, paste, just like any other application. Now, beware, if I undo this, when you do your cutting, make sure that your cursor is over the geometry viewport. Because you can sometimes cut UVs and your model's still there, but all of a sudden your UVs are gone because I have just deleted my UVs. And now I get something like this. Not cool. If I want to move this object somewhere along, from maybe to another scene, or maybe I want to just move a part of an object to a different object altogether, another layer, well, then what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to make sure that I make my selection and I make my cut in the geometry view. The geometry view will, in fact, cut the geometry and the UVs. So now when I paste this, my UVs should have been copied, and they are actually copied, but this part actually never had UVs altogether. So this portion never actually had UVs because I only applied it to this. Now, if I was going to apply or cut this, for example, cut it here, and paste it in here, you will notice that the texture map, in fact, got copied for those selected polygons. So make sure when you do cut, it's always better to just cut the actual geometry view and not this. Sometimes I'm working very quick between these viewports, and I might miss a thing or two, and all of a sudden I just lost my UVs. I started copying, pasting, and somewhere along the lines I lose information. Not good. So again, for this object, what we want to do is we want to separate it in a few pieces. So you have to really analyze what it is that you want. Well, one, I can use a planar projection from the top for this part. So I'm just going to use UV projection, planar, on the y-axis, and this part is nice and flat and all good. And now what I could do technically is I can cut this portion out because it has been UV mapped. I'm going to paste it in another object, and I'm going to go back to my cup, and I'm going to only concentrate on the next portion. So again, I'm going to just select this. So what I did here is I just selected 2 polygons, and then I pressed the up arrow on my, not my numerical pad, but my arrow portion of the keyboard. And then what I do is I press shift and I press up on the keyboard to give me something like this. Or even I could press down as well. Anyways, now I use projection and I make sure I use cylindrical. And again, y-axis, I want to use a cylindrical mapping along the y. I can, of course, move this mapping out of the way, and that's okay. But you'll notice one mistake. You'll notice that this polygon is still here. Well, to fix that, I'm going to once again use projection tool. I'm going to then go into manual, and in here what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a slight rotation, and you notice that that polygon has in fact snapped over. So now when I move it in my viewport, I get a nice cylindrical mapping of that portion of the model. So once again, I'm going to go into the geometry portion of the viewport. I'm going to cut. I'm going to select an empty object, or even the same part that I had previously. I'm going to paste that in there, and once again go back to my cup. I'm going to basically just take parts of the model. I'm going to modify parts of it like this, like that. I can cut this out, paste that into a new piece. I can then, you know, in this case, I really want to delete the UVs because I want to see the geometry of my model. And in this case, I have a few things I could do. One of which is the peeler. Of course, I could use the peeler. And again, sometimes it doesn't really work very well, so you might have to experiment a little bit. And again, I'm going to make sure that automatic is on. So I get something like that. This edge is already selected, so I'm just going to press Alt L. I'm going to make sure that my action center is set to local. Negative off. Like that. Now I can hit Eevee Test. And again, what I really want to do is, you know, sometimes I might just have to scale this up. And of course, you know, you are going to get some artifacting from this UV mapping, but if I subdivide my model by, again, pressing tab, you get a much cleaner result, and this is okay. It's very passable. I can use this, and again, I can cut this, paste it back into the portion of the model that has been already UV'd, and I just go back to my cup, and I only have two more sections, one of which is the bottom. I can project this again, planar. And what you'll notice is that now, considering that I used the manual button previously, and I had offsets and, you know, and I did all this, it's going to keep the same settings for my next projection. Not good, because now what I get is I get an offset and rotations and all this other stuff, you know, added into this projection. So what I want to do again is just choose automatic and then move. And this portion of the model is once again UV'd. So I'm just going to select this in the UV view. I'm going to cut it in my geometry view, paste it back into the portion of the model that has been UV'd. And I'm going to go back into my cup. And I only really have one more part to UV. And from this point, I can use two things. I can either use unwrap. I can, you know, either select a portion of this model and unwrap like this, and get you know, a strange result along here. Of course, there are multiple methods in which I could use to unwrap. I'm not really happy with any of these methods just yet. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to you know, just use the projection tool. I'm going to use cylindrical along the Y, and once again you have a polygon that's you know, peeking through, and of course it's gone from this side. So the only thing I could really do is here just choose manual, rotate slightly, and fix that polygon. So now I have a nice mapping across this object. I just need to scale this down to get a more proportional, you know, result here. And once again, we have an issue with, you know, this polygon here. Well, that's not too bad. What I can do is I can just select that top. I can, again, UV project, planar from top, from here. I can hit that. Of course, what I get is, once again, the offset because of the manual. So I can get a result like that, and that actually works pretty well. You know, I could technically select these edges here and UV peel, and then take that UV peel and attach it back to this. or I could just leave it like this. For me right now, for this example, it doesn't really matter. And now what we get is a bunch of randomly mapped parts that have been offset all over my UV space. So all I'm really going to have to do is I'm just going to start double clicking on some of these parts that have been UV'd. Now, considering I have been UVing parts of this model and cutting and pasting, now these parts, if I double click on any one of these parts now, you'll notice that I am in fact selecting only those portions of the model, not the whole thing. Well, that is because I've physically disconnected parts of the model when I cut and paste. When I pasted it all together, even though those vertices and edges and everything is perfectly aligned, they are not physically connected. Well, I can use this to my advantage because if I need to select anything quickly, I can select quickly in my 3D viewport. I can then zoom in slightly, scale things out, you know, to just kind of fix the proportions. You know, sometimes I don't know exactly which axis I'm going for, but anyways, you know, I have to make sure that everything's readable from left to right. So left to right, readable, 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 and not so much, or is it? Not so much. Okay. So we go back here. Like that. And the result we get is something like that. That's not too bad. So the next thing, of course, is to go to pack UVs, and it'll pack your cup like this. Everything is equal sized. We have our cup UV'd. And of course, this portion of the model is not good, so we have to scale that. Like that. And of course, once again, pack it. And now what you can do is, now that your model is finished as far as UVs go, you have to select the model entirely. Then you have the option of going to, you know, the model tab. You can go to vertex, and then you can merge those vertices and just click. And I usually like to left click and drag left so that my distance is set to 0. And my entire model has been UV'd, and it's now one piece. If I just double click anywhere on the model, it's one piece, it's UV'd. And yeah, so I'm just going to cut this model now back into place and move on with the wrench here for the next model.